The reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King, was one of magnificence, opulence, and near absolute authority. Yet like all stories of human ambition, its closing chapter was shadowed by pain, decay, and mortality. For even the mightiest monarch cannot escape the cruelty of time, and as the summer of 1715 drew to its end, the Grand Palace of Versailles, that glittering symbol of French power and extravagance, became not a stage of triumph, but a chamber of suffering, where the king, once radiant with health and vitality, lay broken by disease, his body betraying the image of eternal glory he had so carefully crafted, his spirit weighed down by loss, regret, and the awareness that his time was almost over. And the courtiers who had long surrounded him with flattery and reverence now gathered in whispers uncertain of the future for the monarch who had ruled France for 72 years. Shaping its destiny, waging its wars, and defining its culture was slipping into the abyss, and each moment of his agony became a lesson in the frailty of human power. For Louis XIV, born in 1638, had spent his youth under the shadow of the Fronde, the noble rebellions that scarred his childhood, teaching him the dangers of weakness, instilling in him the obsession with control that would define his reign, and throughout his life he had projected the image of Apollo, the radiant sun around which the realm revolved, building Versailles not merely as a palace, but as a symbol of his dominance, where nobles were bound by ritual and spectacle, their lives choreographed to his will. Yet as the years passed and the crown grew heavy, Louis endured tragedy, burying his queen, losing children and grandchildren, watching his legacy waver with each death in the line of succession, and by the time his body gave way to gangrene in August of 1715, the monarch who had once embodied France itself was surrounded by both reverence and dread, his courtiers torn between loyalty and anticipation of change. For this scent of death could not be hidden. The king's leg, blackened and rotting, reminded all present that even the sun must set, and in those days of excruciating pain, Louis confronted not only physical decay, but also the moral weight of his decisions. His wars that had drained France's coffers, his insistence on grandeur that had strained the people with taxes, his absolutism that left little space for dissent, and though he tried to maintain dignity, commanding that his attendant continue the rituals of court, the truth was clear that the image of invincibility had crumbled, and the king, once the very embodiment of glory, was now a frail man consumed by suffering. And yet, as often happens at the end of great lives, there were moments of clarity, moments when he spoke with unusual humility, warning his successor, the young Louis XV, to avoid the mistakes he himself had made, to love peace more than war, to remember that kings are born for the happiness of their people, not merely for their own grandeur. And in these words, one sees the paradox of Louis XIV, a monarch who had lived with near divine authority yet died recognizing the limitations of power, a man who had filled Europe with awe yet departed in agony, leaving behind a realm exhausted by conflict but enriched by culture, for under his patronage the arts had flourished. Architecture had soared, fashion had been defined, and France had stood as the center of elegance and prestige. Yet beneath the glittering facade lay hunger, discontent, and the seeds of future revolution. And as his body weakened further, as death crept closer, the rituals of Versailles continued, courtiers pretending at normalcy, physicians offering feudal remedies, prayers whispered, processions arranged, until finally, on September 1st, 1715, after days of torment, the Sun King breathed his last, and silence fell upon Versailles, a silence heavy with history. For with his passing ended the longest reign in European history up to that time, and the question of legacy loomed large. For Louis XIV had reshaped monarchy, had embodied absolutism, had turned a kingdom into a stage where his every gesture mattered. And yet he had also left behind a country burdened, a dynasty fragile, a people weary, and those statues, paintings, and architecture preserved his image of eternal glory. His final days told another truth, that power is mortal, that even the brightest star dims. And so his story reminds us of the duality of greatness, that brilliance and suffering, triumph and tragedy, are never far apart, that every throne carries a shadow, and that no crown, no matter how dazzling, can guard against death. And thus the tale of Louis XIV's last days is not only the story of a king but of humanity itself, the inevitable decline that follows even the grandest ascent, the frailty that unites us all, and the enduring question of what we leave behind, whether it is monuments of stone, or lessons of humility, or warnings against the excesses of pride. And as Versailles continued to glitter as courtiers shifted allegiance to the new king, the echoes of Louis XIV's reign lingered, his wars remembered. His palace admired, his rituals imitated, but his suffering also whispered as a warning that behind the mask of grandeur lies the unchanging truth that kings are men, and men are mortal.